Okay, so please welcome Dr. Lola Margulies.
Thank you for having me here. I've never been to your high school, but I'm very happy to be here. Are you 10th graders? Or 11th graders? What? 11? 12?
11 and 10.
10 and 11?
Yeah.
Okay, nice to meet you. I'm glad to be here, but not so happy to tell you about my Holocaust experience because it's pretty gruesome. So you got to be prepared for being shocked here and there, emotionally shocked. But I hope it's going to be a good learning experience for you. And my message is that you are the hope of the future, really. And what I want you to carry away from this is that you should not be apathetic. You should not be reluctant to speak up, and most importantly, defend your rights. Do not let violations of human rights take place. Fight it. Be activist. Be outspoken. Make sure that you are alert at all times to see any signs of human injustice. It's not always so easy to see, but you have to be on the lookout. You have to be alert. You have to make sure that you do not miss any signs of violation of human rights. So that's my message. And it's based, of course, on my experience. It's very easy to let things just slide along or get by and not to speak up and not to be concerned. But that is not the way injustice should be treated. It should be treated with the most concern, with your eyes wide open, with your hearts involved. Because otherwise, injustice will take over. So you have to be on the lookout to defend your rights, defend your environment. That is my message. My Holocaust experience begins in 1941 when the German army invaded the part of Poland where I was living. A small town called Skalat in the eastern part of Poland, not too far from the Russian border. The moment the German army marched into Skalat in 1941, they murdered 400 Jews just the day after they marched in. People coming out of the synagogue, innocent people, charitable people, slaughtered. And the sad thing that I can report to you is that the natives pointed out to the German occupiers who were out to kill the Jews who the Jews were, pointed out houses where Jews lived, synagogues where they prayed, streets where they walked. That was a very sad commentary, or is a very sad commentary on anti-Semitism that already existed before the Germans took over and decided to exterminate all the Jews in our town and everywhere else in Poland, of which 6 million were killed. So I was 11 years old when this Holocaust began for me. And my paternal grandfather was one of those first 400 Jews who were rounded up and killed. He was coming out of the synagogue, an innocent, wonderful man, charitable, loving, just rounded up and killed. That was the beginning of the Holocaust for me. The next bad thing that happened was that we were all told to move into a ghetto, which is a designated area of the town, small, crowded. In that ghetto, 4 families lived in one room. 4 families in one room. We just had a sheet hanging down in the 4 corners to give us a little privacy. Just picture this. But that was nothing compared to what came, because we lived in constant state of fear with no hope whatsoever that we would survive. Because Hitler had said that he's going to leave all of Europe, and Poland especially, but all of Europe, and the town that I was living in, he was going to make it Juden Rhine, clean of Jews or free of Jews. All the Jews will be exterminated. That's what he promised to the world. And the sad commentary is that the world didn't take it seriously. That's the unfortunate thing. They sort of stood by and waited for this massacre of millions of innocent people. So there's nothing worse than to stand by and let injustice happen and not to try to do anything about it. That is the worst. Apathy is the worst. So that's my message to you young people who are the future of our country and the world. Don't let that injustice take over, because then everything is lost. So let me tell you a few incidents of this survival of mine. In other words, I'm sitting here because steps were taken by various individuals or communities to try and survive. One of those steps was carried out by my father, whom I always credit my talk with. He was a true survivor, and he would not let anything happen to his family. So let me describe to you the first action. An action was an event that is too horrible to even describe. In the middle of the night, the Nazis, the German police, would come with trucks, run open houses where Jews lived, take them out, put them on trucks, beat them sometimes to death if they didn't walk quickly enough, put them on trucks like cattle. And then the trucks would take them to trains, to cattle trains. And the cattle trains would transport them to death camps, concentration camps, death camps. In our neighborhood, the camp was called Belzec. You walk along now for miles in Belzec. Today, you could walk along, and there will be thousands and thousands and thousands of graves on either side of you, where Jews were killed and buried, some of them buried alive, where they were told to dig their own grave and then they just fell in there even though they weren't shot. That's a pretty gruesome reality of that time. So what do? You wait for death, day in and day out, night and day and night, from minute to minute, from hour to hour. You just wait for death. That's torture. That's worse than torture, if there is such a thing. So one evening, my father hears trucks coming into our ghetto, and he says, "Run to the cellar, run, run." So we ran to the cellar, and the door was closed, Now the door to the cellar was not a door like this. It opened up from the floor. You understand? Opened up like this. So we ran there and the door closed. And my mother says to me, "Where's Father?" And I'm looking, I said, "I don't know. He was just here. Where is he?" Well, Father was not there. What he did, my father, was to sacrifice himself. He chose to virtually sacrifice himself for us. He stayed on top of the cellar, closed the door, put all kinds of junk on top of that door so it wouldn't be recognized as a door. Camouflaged it. And he was outside. He ran to the attic where he was an open target for the Germans. So we're in that cellar, and the Germans are running above us, shouting, "Juden, Juden," means Jews, Jews. And all of a sudden, my 3-year-old cousin starts to cry. She wanted water, and we had no water. We were unprepared for this. Now you imagine this scenario. Our killers are above us, and a child is crying, and you can't stop her. She's only 3 years old. She doesn't understand that there's a massacre waiting for us. So that was the first action. A miracle happened, something that I call a miracle, for lack of a better word. My grandma had a tavern, and she had lots of liquor all over the kitchen, and in the tavern, and here and there, and everywhere. And the German soldiers, the killers, saw the liquor, they started to drink. And what do you think happens when you drink? You get high, right? You get sort of drunk. So they forgot about looking for us, started to laugh, didn't hear my 3-year-old cousin cry, and left. That was the miracle that saved our lives. That was the first one. Then what do? You wait for death. What do? So my father again decided to save us by finding a farmer, a poor farmer who wanted to save Jews for money. If you pay them not currency but with gold watches, rings, earrings, he said he would save us. So this farmer came with a wagon full of Jews already. And my father said, "Okay, he's going to take you to hide you." So I said, "Who's you?" He said, "You and your mother. There's no room for anybody else." Well, I was 12 years old at the time. And I started to scream. I became hysterical. I started to scream and cry. "I'm not going without you," I said to my father, "and without Mike, my brother. I'm not going anywhere. We're going to stay here, and we're going to die together, or we're going to leave together, but we're not separating. No way, no how are we separating. So this farmer took the wagon. He thought the German patrol would hear me and come and get him and the wagon full of Jews that he was going to save. And so he left without us. What did he do? He actually did what we were hoping would never happen, but it happened a lot. He took the wagon full of Jews that he had straight to the police and gave them away. So had I been an average little girl without getting hysterical and crying, I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you. I would have been taken to a death camp and I would have died there for sure. So what do you do? The worst thing in the world is to live without hope. When there's no hope, it's the worst thing in the world. And that's how we were living at that time. But my father didn't stop. He said, okay, I found somebody else who's going to hide you. And so this farmer came with a wagon, and again, my father and brother were going to stay back. There was no room for them, so they were out to save me and my mother. And they wanted to put us on that wagon. And I started the same hysterical crying that I did before. I wouldn't go and separate from my father and brother. No way, no how. 12-year-old hysterical girl saved my life. Because as this farmer left the ghetto and went through the town to the woods where he was living, his wagon was intercepted by the patrol. And had I been there, my mother had been there, we would have been dead. Again, I saved my life. What do you do now? Well, you either try and look for another hiding place, or you are dead, or you're just as good as dead. So my father didn't stop looking to find some place where he could hide us. He always felt that he and my brother will somehow survive. I don't know how he figured that out. That's beyond me even today, to realize how he managed to think that way. But he was always thinking or saving me and my mother first. Then he would worry about himself and my brother. So that was the scenario. Finally, a labor camp opened up in Scalat, in the town, and all the men and the boys who were like 15 and up were taken to the labor camp. There, they were taken to work very hard on railroads and quarries and carrying heavy stones, and they were dying of starvation and infection, like typhus. Rampant infection was killing them. But there was nothing they could do. There was nothing they could do. Just wait for death. Finally, my father found a farmer, a poor farmer, who wanted not money but gold to hide Jews. And he came for us. My father and brother were already in the camp, but he took me and my mother and my grandmother and my aunt and my cousin, 5 of us. 5. He took us into hiding, into his farm, a poor little farm at the edge of the woods. I got there with my mother, and he said, just keep quiet, I will lead you to your hiding place. Obviously, he didn't want us to talk because there were patrols all over. So he opens up a chicken coop, the chickens are flying, we disturbed their egg laying. They were very upset, they were flying all over. He said, open the door behind the chicken coop and go down that ladder. So that's what we did. Went down the ladder, at least 10 feet underground, probably more. Dark, a little oil lamp in the corner, tiny little light, 2 holes in the ground for oxygen. I looked up and I saw them, small holes. I look in front of me and I see already 6 people are there, a family of 6, parents, 2 brothers and 2 sisters. And they're sitting on boards, on wooden boards about a foot wide. Just wooden boards, that's it. These were their beds. And the boards next to them were our beds. This wide. I looked up, I saw another few steps behind the main ladder. And there was a sheet hanging there, and behind the sheet there was a bucket. That was our toilet. A bucket behind the sheet on a small ladder. At first, we got a piece of bread in the morning and in the evening, and a bowl of soup. In the morning and in the evening. That was a king's diet, a queen's diet, because slowly the bread disappeared. He didn't have enough to feed us. And the soup became thinner and thinner until it was just water with a few potatoes floating. And I'll never forget those few potatoes floating. With the skin, that was a very important, because the skin had vitamins. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here. So, that was our diet. A starvation diet, it became, completely starvation diet. The bread got smaller and smaller and disappeared altogether. And the soup got thinner and thinner. It was a starvation diet. It was just starvation from minute to minute, from day to night. Starving. I hope no one of you ever experiences starvation. It is torture. Torture. One evening, the peasant came down and said, "I have bad news for you. The camp has been liquidated. All the Jews in the camp were taken to the outskirts of the town and slaughtered, buried in the graves that they dug for themselves." That's what happened. So my mother and I start crying. That means my brother and my father are dead. We were hysterical, crying. And what good did it do us? No good whatsoever. So now, what do? You starve and you wait for death. That's about it. And how long did this go on? You wouldn't believe it. But it went on for 9 months. 9 months. 9 long months of starvation and fear. Starvation and fear that the German patrols would find us. Underground, 9 months without seeing daylight. You would think human beings could not survive this, right? But the human instinct of self-preservation is so strong, somehow, we survived this. I don't know how. I don't know how. In March of 1944, we were finally liberated by the Russian army as they were advancing to destroy the German army. They finally conquered that part of Poland on their way to destroy the German army and liberated us from this torture and starvation and death. After 9 long months underground, we came out and saw daylight, the sun. I'll never forget that. It turns out that my father and brother were able to save themselves in that horrible death camp that they were in. And they joined us when we were liberated. A miraculous occurrence, a miraculous event, nothing short of a miracle. We were reunited after the Russian army liberated that part of Poland, and the Germans retreated, kept retreating back. So this is how I survived the Holocaust. Thank you for listening. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Don't be shy now.
Yes, would you take the questions, please?
Sure, I will. Go ahead.
I can't hear them from here.
Sure, no problem.
Okay.
Father and her brother were not under there with her? They were not?
She's asking if your brother and your father were with you underground. Were your father and your brother with you at the time?
When we were liberated?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, my father and brother finally joined us in that bunker, in that underground that we were hiding in. That's a long story, but my father was very, very much a survivor. He found out inadvertently where this little farm was of this poor farmer, and he knew the woods very well, because my grandma, his mother, had a tavern. He used to go to the farmers in the woods and buy liquor for her tavern. So he knew the woods backwards and forwards. And he found where we were hiding. And the farmer would not admit that we were there. He said, "Go to the woods, I'll give you some bread. There are other Jews there hiding. Go away because there are German patrols. They're going to find you. Just go to the woods. Join the other Jews. I have nothing else for you here. Just a couple of slices of bread. And leave quickly because the patrols are all over the place. My father recognized that he was lying, that he was hiding us. My father was so astute, so incredibly smart. I don't know how he realized that. But the peasants still refused to admit that he was hiding me and my mother. Then my brother came to the rescue. He saw the farmer's wife sitting there with her 10-year-old daughter and combing her hair. And he said to the farmer's wife, listen, suppose you were separated from this beautiful, loving daughter, and you were told you could not be reunited with her. How would you feel? What would you do? How would you feel? She started to cry, and she said to her husband, let them in, let them in. And that's when my brother and father joined us in that bunker, in that hiding place, many feet underground, and that's how we survived together. So a number of these miraculous occurrences enabled us to survive this Holocaust. Any other questions? I will welcome any questions. Please don't hesitate to ask.
What does she remember most about being liberated?
She asked, what do you remember most about being liberated?
What do I remember most about being liberated? That was the question. Thank you for asking. About seeing the light for the first time in 9 months. Buried, I was buried for 9 months underground in a grave for the living. That's what I called it. It was a grave for the living. Not for the dead, for the living. I finally came out and I saw light. That's what I remember most. Being liberated. Any other questions? Please don't hesitate to ask.
Whatever happened to your cousin?
She wants to know what happened to your cousin.
What happened to my cousin? Oh, that's a good question. She survived with us, and her mother too. We were together in that hiding place, in that bunker, for 9 months, and they survived with us. And she's still alive, believe it or not. Her mother, of course, died, but she's still alive.
What did you guys do after God helped?
Any other questions?
One instance wants to know, what have you done since you've been liberated?
What have I done
Since then?
since then?
Yes.
Oh, that's very, that could take a while to answer. Well, at first we led a nomadic life. We just went from village to village to make sure we get behind the front so we're not being bombarded by crossfire from the Germans fighting the Russians. Ended up in a Ukrainian part of Russia, which is now the Ukrainian Republic. And there, a man took pity on us. He had a garden that he was cultivating for his family who went to Siberia to escape the Germans. Now he was bringing them back to their house. He said, if you want to have a housing of, help me prepare the garden for my family. Then you can sleep in this house. Just cultivate the garden for my family who's coming back from Siberia. And so we did that. And we had a roof over our head and living a halfway normal life for the first time in many months. And after we did that, we stayed there about a year until the rest of Poland was liberated. Sorry. Yeah, until the rest of Poland was liberated from the Germans. And then we went out into the open and found housing and slowly began a halfway normal life. I still did not go to school. I lost 5 years of school, which I had to make up. It took me a while to do that later. But now I still didn't have a chance to go to school. I had to help my mother and father make a living. So she would bake cookies, and I would go to the market and sell the cookies that she baked. So we could somehow afford to buy some food from the farmers, some eggs, a chicken. We went to the Russian soldiers, begged them for clothing. The farmers were very poor. They had no clothing for the winter. So we got some jackets from the army. We took those jackets to the farmer. They were happy to give us eggs and chickens and God knows what for those jackets because they were freezing to death. So that's how we started to eat like normal human beings. But it took a while before we started a normal life. I still was missing years of schooling, and I didn't make it up till I came to the United States, which was in 1947. 4 years, 44 to 47, 3 years after I was liberated. We came to the United States. Then I began a normal life.
My last question? Sure.
How did the Holocaust experience change your outlook on life?
How did your Holocaust experience change your outlook on life?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. How did you hear the question? How did my Holocaust experience change my outlook on life? That is a very difficult question to answer, I can tell you that. There's a huge scar there in my brain that will never forget the Holocaust. Never. No matter how I try. After nightmares and after God knows how much suffering, I tried so hard to repress those memories so they don't give me those nightmares, so they don't plague me. so I can live a normal life. It is not easy. It is not easy. But I managed to give you a conception of how strong our self-preservation instinct is. I managed not only to get a doctorate in genetics, I'm a geneticist by training, but to raise a family. I have a wonderful son, I have 2 wonderful granddaughters, and the scars will never heal, but I've been able to live a fairly normal life, in quotation marks. And the wonderful thing is that after the war, after this horrible experience, I have never experienced anti-Semitism in this country in all these years. So I'm very grateful for that.
Any other questions? No, but I do have a statement. I just wanted to say that we truly appreciate you being here and sharing a difficult past that you went through. And we admire the strength that you have. And I think everyone agrees that the story you just
Can
shared.
they hear you?
Yeah, they can hear me. They can hear me.
I'm just curious.
I can use my teacher voice, they know. I just wanted to say that we truly appreciate you being here. We truly do.
Thank you, Thank you very much for having me.